You didn't do anything wrong. The feeder is still full. The water is clean. The yard is the same yard it was in May. The same yard that was full of birds every single morning. Before the coffee was done. Before the light had even settled in. You haven't changed a thing. And yet, the mornings are different now. There is a stillness out there that wasn't there in June. Something that was present. Every day, reliably, the way a good habit is reliable, is not anymore. And you feel it before you can name it. The feeder isn't moving the way it was. The yard isn't making the sounds it was. The birds are gone. Not all of them. Some are still there. But the ones you were watching for, the regulars, the ones you learned to recognize by their timing and their habits, they're not coming the way they were. And if you've had a feeder long enough to have seen this happen before, you already know it comes every year around the same time. June into July. Like clockwork. Like a door that closes. And you have never known exactly why. Most people don't ask. They assume the birds moved on. They refill the feeder. They wait. And eventually, in August and September, the yard comes back to life, and they never find out what actually happened in those quiet weeks. This video is the explanation you've been looking for. That bird in the leaves. You've seen him on the thumbnail. You probably thought you were looking at a bird that was hiding. You were. But not from you. By the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly what that cardinal is doing in those leaves. Where he goes every summer. Why the timing is not a coincidence. And what you can do in the next 3 weeks that will matter more for your yard than anything you've done all spring. 3 things. Where they went, when they're coming back, and what that image actually means. Stay all the way through. Because the last thing I want to tell you, the thing at the end, is the one that changes how you stand at that window in July. And it is not a sad thing. It is actually one of the most remarkable things a living creature does. Welcome back to Birds Minds. If you're new here, subscribe before you leave. What you're about to understand about July and your yard is going to make the rest of the bird year make more sense than it ever has. Think about what they just did. May and June in the American backyard are not simply busy months for birds. They are physiologically extreme ones. From the moment territory lines are drawn in early spring, a bird's body is running at a deficit it has been preparing for since the previous fall. Courtship, nest construction, incubation through cold nights when the temperature drops and the eggs need the heat of a body that is also, always, watching for predators. And then the nestlings arrive, helpless, loud, needing more food each day than the adults themselves consume. The adults cycle back and forth, branch to nest, nest to shrub, shrub back to branch, from before light until after dark, for weeks. Many species do it twice. By early July, the fat reserves that carried them through spring migration are gone. The feathers that were pristine in April are frayed at the edges. The hormonal cascade that drove all of that urgency, the relentless biological clock of the breeding season, has finally, mercifully, begun to subside. They are not gone. They are exhausted. The quiet in your yard is not abandonment. It is the sound of something that has been running very hard, finally stopping to breathe. Here is the piece most people have never heard. And it explains more about July than almost anything else. Birds molt. Beginning in late June and running through July, most songbirds shed and replace their primary flight feathers, the long outer feathers that do the actual work of flight. Every one of them. Not gradually, not invisibly. Feather by feather, in sequence, until the wing that carried them through spring is rebuilt from scratch. The process is expensive. Physically uncomfortable in the way that growing anything from the inside out is uncomfortable. And during active molt, a bird is aerodynamically compromised, carrying feathers at different stages of development simultaneously, some fully formed, some still blood-filled and fragile, some already gone. The wing does not work the way it did in May. Flight is less efficient, escape is less certain. A bird in molt is the most vulnerable it will be all year, and it knows it. So it does the only rational thing available to a creature in that position. It disappears. Into the densest shrub it can find, the thickest hedge, the most impenetrable corner of the yard. It calls less, it moves less. It makes itself, as deliberately as a living thing can, invisible. The cardinal in those leaves on the thumbnail, that is not a posed image, that is biology. There is one more thing pulling them away from your feeder. And this one will surprise you, because it seems like it should work the other way. Summer is insect season, peak abundance. The caterpillars that hatch in June are at their largest by July. The beetles are out. The moths, the grasshoppers, the soft-bodied larvae that live in the leaf litter and the bark and the underside of every stem in your yard. Right now, outside your window, the natural world is offering birds a buffet that your feeder cannot match, not in calories and not in what their bodies actually need. During molt, protein is not a preference, it is a requirement. You cannot build a flight feather on sunflower seeds. The nutrient profile isn't there. A single caterpillar returns more usable protein than a whole platform of seed, and a bird rebuilding 10 primary feathers at once knows the difference at a level that doesn't require thought. So here is what I want you to hear, and I want you to hear it clearly. The birds are not choosing insects over your feeder because your yard failed. They are choosing insects because your yard worked. The habitat you have kept, the plants, the leaf cover, the undisturbed corners. That is what harbors the insects they need right now. A quiet feeder in July is not a failure. It is proof that something is alive out there. Now here is the part that changes the picture entirely. The birds moving through your yard in July are not all the birds you know. Some are your regulars. In molt, in cover, moving less and calling less than they were in spring. You've met them. They're still there. But some of the birds that passed through your yard this week have never been there before. They were hatched this season, a few miles away, by parents whose territory was never yours to observe. They are young birds, weeks old, some of them, navigating the world beyond their birth territory for the first time, looking for places to remember. Your yard is one of the places they are evaluating right now, whether you can see them or not. And some of the birds in your yard in July have already turned south. Not in September, not after the leaves change. Now, certain warblers, certain shorebirds, certain flycatchers, their southward movement begins in July, quietly, weeks before most people notice that fall migration has started. They pass through without ceremony, without the songs they carried in spring, easier to miss than to see. The yard that feels empty is the most crowded it has been all year. The difference is that none of them are announcing themselves. They are passing through, they are watching, and some of them are deciding whether your yard is worth coming back to. So, what do you do right now? Because right now is not nothing. The next 3 weeks are, in fact, some of the most consequential weeks your yard will have all year. Not because of what's here, because of what's coming. The birds that will arrive in August and September, the early migrants, the residents returning from dispersal, the juveniles making their first ever decisions about where to spend the winter. They will assess your yard in the first days of encountering it. That assessment is fast. A bird deciding whether a yard belongs on its winter circuit does not take months to decide. It takes days, maybe less. Keep the feeder full, even if it barely moves, even if it feels like you're filling it for no one. The birds in molt, in cover, 20 feet away, they are checking it. Not every morning, but they know it is there. And when they come out of cover in late July, with new feathers and renewed energy, the first places they return to are the ones that were there for them while they were invisible. Add mealworms if you can. Live or dried, they pull in species that seeds won't touch in summer. Bluebirds, wrens, warblers passing through. Because the protein profile matches what those birds are already hunting. Try it for a week, and keep the water moving. In July heat, a dripper or a fountain is worth more than any seed you can offer. The sound of moving water carries. Birds find it from farther away than you expect. It is the one thing every species needs, and in summer, it is the one thing hardest to find. You are not waiting for fall. You are building it. In late August, something changes. Not dramatically, not all at once, but if you stand at the window in the early morning and pay attention to the quality of the light rather than the contents of the feeder, you will feel it before you can name it. The angle is different, lower. The shadows are longer at 7 in the morning than they were in June. The air holds something the July air did not, a coolness at the edges, brief, gone by 9, but there. The season is turning, and it is turning in a direction the birds have been waiting for. Researchers who study avian migration describe what happens inside a bird's body at this moment as Zugunruhe, a German word that translates, roughly, as migratory restlessness. A physiological awakening, triggered by photoperiod, by the shortening of the day, that sets something moving inside a creature that has been still for weeks. It does not wait for the leaves to change. It does not wait for frost. It begins now, in the last days of August, quietly, while the yard still looks like summer. The birds feel it before you do. The ones in cover begin to move. The ones in dispersal begin to pull back toward the territories they know. And the yards they are heading toward, the ones already on their internal map, the ones that held through the quiet weeks, those yards are filling up again. Yours is one of them, if you held it. Look at her. The cardinal in those leaves, the one you've been looking at since the thumbnail. You thought you were looking at a bird that had gone quiet, gone still, gone somewhere you couldn't follow. But she hasn't gone anywhere. She is in the densest cover she could find, in a yard she has known since the first week of April, doing the most demanding thing a bird does outside of raising young. She is rebuilding herself. Every primary flight feather she will use to outfly a hawk this winter, to navigate ice storms, to find her way back to this yard in March. Those feathers are growing right now, in the dark of that shrub, in the heat of July. One by one, in the slow and costly way that living things repair themselves when no one is watching. The molt is almost finished. The new feathers are nearly full length. In a few weeks, she will move into open air again, and she will be brighter than she was in June, faster than she was in May. The red will be deeper, the flight will be cleaner, she will have earned every bit of it. And the first place she goes when she comes out of those leaves is not somewhere new, it is somewhere known. It is the yard that was still there when she couldn't come to it. It is yours, if you held it. Her name, if you gave her one, was probably something you said without meaning to. The one that came every morning. The cardinal. Her. She was on the feeder in April before the coffee was done. Reliable as weather. The red of her against the gray of early spring. There is no color quite like it. And you noticed it. Even when you told yourself you weren't the kind of person who paid attention to things like that. She disappeared in June. Not all at once. A few mornings of absence, then a week, then you stopped checking for her specifically and started just checking the feeder. The way you stop looking for something when looking starts to hurt. She was never far, 3 houses over, maybe less, in the thickest hedge she could find, growing back every feather, waiting out the most vulnerable weeks of her year, in the only way available to her, stillness, cover, patience. She is almost done now. And your yard, the one she spent spring in, the one she knows the corners of, the one that was still provisioned through the weeks she couldn't come to it, that is where she is heading. Not because she has nowhere else to go, because she remembers, because she has been counting on it. You didn't lose her. You held the yard while she was away. The quiet was never empty. You know that now. The stillness of July, the feeder that didn't move, the mornings that started without sound, the yard that felt like it had forgotten you. That was not absence. It was information. It was a system running exactly the way a healthy system runs, in the parts of the cycle that happen out of sight, in the cover, in the heat, in the slow work of repair that living things do when no one is watching. The cardinal in those leaves was never a mystery. She was a relationship. The yard and the bird and the person standing at the window, each one counting on the others without being able to say so. That is what a backyard becomes, over time, if you let it. Not a feeding station, not a hobby, something closer to a trust. Every quiet July morning at that window is a pause between 2 movements of something much larger than a feeder. The first movement was spring, the second is coming. Have you ever stood there in July and felt that stillness? Really felt it? The specific weight of a yard that seems to be holding its breath? And then watched them come back? Tell me what that was like. I read every one.